Good afternoon and welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission on Monday, October 4th, 2010. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Ajemian?
Present.
Commissioner Armenian? Commissioner Chan? Commissioner Miller?
Present.
President Yao?
Present. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 2A, approval of the September 13th, 2010 meeting minutes.
So there were a couple of changes that we conveyed to George already from Thanku and myself. Were there any other changes from the other commissioners?
I had none.
If not, and did you make those changes, George?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So as noted, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
One second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for approval of the minutes as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? No. Motion carries. Next item, please.
Reports information, item 3A, quarterly scoreboard update. Glenn Steiger?
Thank you.
President Yao, members of the BWP Commission, I'm pleased to be able to give you our latest quarterly update on our strategic plan and through our scoreboard. And I apologize for the graphic up there. It's a little hard to read, but you all do have a copy in your possession. A couple of things have occurred in the last quarter that I think are notable before I go through some of the actual items. One is we have reconfigured the year that we base our benchmark on to go to the fiscal year. It had been calendar, it's now fiscal, so that it lines up with the budget. It's just a minor tweak, but it is worth noting. And we have done an update of a number of the initiatives contained here to recognize the fact that we've had some budgetary changes where we've actually pushed out some of our budget projects outside of this 5-year plan. So some of that will be noted here, but I did want to briefly mention that to you before I actually got into the specifics. So what I'd like to do is concentrate on those areas that are green and red, because the green, if you recall, is where we are ahead of schedule. The red is where we're behind schedule, and the yellow represents that we are on track according to the date shown on the scoreboard. It means that we are moving towards that date. It doesn't mean we've hit it yet, of course. It means that we're moving towards it at the pace we expected. The very first item is to produce 3,856 acre-feet of water from the Verdugo Basin. We are ahead of schedule on that particular item, and that's due to the fact that we are currently developing 2 new wells in the Verdugo Basin, which we expect to have operational before 2014. So we're very, very pleased that we're able to move ahead with that. The next item is the item relating to recycled water, and unfortunately, that's just the opposite in that we are behind schedule. We have, in fact, developed the 5-year build-out plan for this particular project that would allow us to get to this goal. However, what we have not been able to do is put together an acceptable budgetary plan to allow us to meet that goal. So until we have a budgetary plan that is acceptable both to the Commission and the City Council, we'll be behind schedule in this area. So I want to make sure I'm clear, though, that the actual proposed project has been initially designed, not final design, but initially designed. So we do know where it will go. Instituting a 2.5% public benefit charge like charge to the water fund for conservation measures is also behind schedule. And again, that's a function of a number of things. One would be our current rate issues on the water side, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. Secondly, the restriction from Proposition 218 that restricts what we can and can't do with revenues from the water side. What we are doing, however, is looking at this issue on a more global basis, and we've now taken it to more of a statewide level, and we're using our relationship with CMUA to push forth in a global way to see if we can't institute this type of charge on a statewide basis so it would apply to all agencies equally. Now, that's a longer-term goal, but nonetheless, because of that, we're behind schedule with where we would like to be. Reduce water usage by 7% over 2006. We are well ahead of that. We are now at least 16% below where we were. And in fact, last month we were over 20% in one given month. So we're making tremendous strides in that area. Under power supply, we are on track in all areas in terms of reducing electrical usage by 7%. We're right on track to get to 2014. Increase the efficiency of our Grayson Power Plant to less than or equal to 10,000 BTU heat rate. We're on track for that. And we will be giving you an update at next month's meeting in more depth on how we are looking to do that. Reduce greenhouse emissions to 1990 levels. We are on track with that. And the major means that we're on track is with our renewable portfolio, which currently stands at approximately 23%. For the current year, we have actually sold 3 percentage points of our renewable to Pasadena to help them out, so we're still at 20%, which is well above where we should be today, so it puts us on track. Achieve a balanced energy portfolio. We are very much on track with that, and again, just as a reminder, that would give us 33% renewable by 2020, approximately 33% of physical generation owned by GWP, and about 33% of off-system purchases. So we're on track for that. Operate our energy management resources group under defined metrics. In fact, we've been spending a significant amount of effort recently interviewing various consultants that will help us define those metrics, and it's not nearly as easy or as well defined as we thought it was, but in fact it's a bit more interesting, and we'll be back to you probably in the next quarter to give you the results of that. But we are definitely on track to determine what those metrics are and how we will measure them. Our external transmission review, again, is on track. We've finished a study by the structure group. We are now analyzing what the structure group has told us, and we will be back again to you most likely again in the first quarter of 2011 with a full report on transmission, which I think you'll find quite interesting. Customer service, consistently achieve above average customer service satisfaction. We continue to do that. Ensure that affected customers and public are consistently notified of all GWP activities. As we've mentioned in the past, we now have a fully functional mass notification system that GWP developed and administers for the entire city. It's been used a number of times for city emergencies and also for general notification of various issues with GWP. It's a very good system, so that we're actually, if anything, we're probably ahead of that, but we said we're on track. Restore minor power outages within 10 minutes and major outages within 20 minutes. While we're not at that level yet, our trend is toward getting there by 2014, so we're on track. On the rate area, well, again, we mentioned that we're currently in a process to increase rates. We've proposed 3.8%, but even at the 3.8%, that would still put us at or below 80% of the average rates in the area. So we are currently maintaining that, and even with our proposed rate increase, we would still be at that level. Ensure that reduce electric rates to 35% below Edison, and that was our stretch goal, if you recall. It continues to be a stretch goal. However, we've made progress since we first put this in. We now have rates that range from 15% below Edison's to over 20%, depending upon the rate structure, the classification, and so on. So we are making progress, but yes, it still is a stretch goal to get to 35%. And there are a number of variables that continue to enter into this picture. increase annual electrical wholesale revenue to $10 million. That's by 2014. We are on track to do that, and given where we are today, if we continue on track, we'll actually be ahead of that, and we expect to do better than $10 million. But currently, we are putting the resources in place. We have the approval for the resources that we need. We have the process in place to allow us to do this, so we are on track for that. And then reduce losses on the electric side to less than 10%. We've discussed in the past how electrical losses are an issue for GWP. We've identified the fact that we believe a significant portion of our losses are due to theft of service or some type of diversion. We have now allocated a new position, revenue protection, and that, along with the installation of our smart grid system, certainly will get us to understand and identify where we do have theft of service and diversion. So we are on track to hit that goal. In fact, we're ahead of schedule. On our water infrastructure, we're ahead of schedule on reducing unaccounted for water. And the reason for that is smart grid. Smart grid will determine and detect where we have leaks. And in fact, even in just the 500 meters that we have in place now on the proof of concept, we've already identified, I believe it's four potential leak situations. So we are well ahead of that. The smart grid is going to do wonders for us in that area. The replacement of 25 miles of pipe is now behind schedule, and that's a direct function of our budgetary concerns and the fact that we've had to push out projects outside of our 5-year horizon that we originally expected to do. This was one of them. So we are behind schedule, and we will continue to be behind schedule for a while until we can get our rate structure in the condition that will allow us to be able to meet this goal. While we won't stop doing replacements, we certainly will be stretching out the amount we do per year. We are implementing asset management on both the water and electric side. Rather than doing it as we originally proposed in a single, very large project, we're doing it in very small incremental projects. So while we are not moving ahead in one direction all at one time, we are incrementally moving ahead. Therefore, we are still on track for both water and electric in asset management. Reducing the number of preventable outages, and the key here is preventable, to less than 25 per year. We're ahead of schedule on that. We expect to stay that way. Our system has held together very well. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to just show you a very short 2-slide presentation on what we just how we just hit our system peak last week, a new all-time system peak, and how we maintained reliability during that time. So this is a very positive thing for our electric system. On the other hand, upgrading our transmission system completely to 69 kV, again, is behind schedule. Same reason as we had on the water side. We've pushed projects out. Had to push them out in order to maintain our budgetary constraints. Convert system feeders from 4 kV to 12 kV. We're on schedule with that. But again, that could suffer. That's right on the edge. It depends on maintaining the budget and the revenues that we currently expect. But any deviation in that will affect that in the negative. Replace all mechanical relays. We're ahead of schedule on that. And again, I mentioned the asset management earlier. Workforce issues. We are a bit behind on job satisfaction. Number of issues for that. Not the least of which are associated with economic conditions, which are difficult, but we're dealing with them. Yeah.
Excuse me, I just want to point out, maybe we could update the slide there.
Sorry.
Yeah. Is this visible to people on the TV? Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you.
So we're a bit behind on our job satisfaction, and we're concerned about that. So we're going to take some steps to improve that. We're on track to maintain a 5% or less vacancy rate by 2012, and again, we probably would be there now if it wasn't for economic conditions. Our OSHA incident safety rate is above 2.0 currently, and of course this is a current goal, so we are therefore behind on that, so we're making efforts to improve safety both there and for preventable motor vehicle accidents. On systems, you'll hear later a full summary of where we are with Smart Grid, so I won't go into that other than to say that actually we're ahead of schedule. This shows December 2013. We said we're on schedule because we now have expanded the Smart Grid project, but our original Smart Grid project, which we had thought would be finished by 2013, will be finished well before that. So we're ahead of schedule. Our GIS initiative on the electric side, keep in mind we're already finished on the water side, is on schedule for a 2013 completion. With the addition of our Assistant General Manager of Finance, Bill Fox, we've made great strides in developing new processes to integrate GWP financial processes with those of the city. So that's been a great help to us. We are on track for integration of our data systems to remove redundant data entry. We are on track to look at new profitable business ventures. At this point, not much we can talk about, but we are on track, and we think by 2013 we will have a number of different business ventures, mostly tied in to the fact that Smart Grid will be available to allow us to do the kinds of things we can't do today. Under City of Glendale, improve communications with customers, City Council, City Departments. We've made strides. We are on track. I think we've done a good job, and we can always improve in that area. That's why we haven't given it a green. Develop an optimum transfer level for mutual benefit. What we have done is we have, rather than keep the transfer at a percentage of our revenue, we've fixed it at a fixed level. And for the last 2 years, it's been the same number, and we expect that to continue in the future. This gives certainty to the city so that they know exactly how much will be transferred each year. It gives certainty to GWP so that we know exactly how much we need to transfer to the city each year. Again, we've implemented additional communications vehicles. We now we tweet. We have Twitter. We use it. We don't have a lot of followers on Twitter right now, so we'd like to mention that. We'd like some more, but we have a number of new vehicles for communication. And again, I'll mention the mass notification system, which has been a great help to us. We continue to work with other city departments. We don't have new ventures, but we have been very, very aggressive in working with other departments, primarily Public Works, to find additional ways to work better and more cooperative than we had in the past. And I think that's been a very, very beneficial initiative for both us and Public Works. And again, our outreach plan, we have a number of outreach plans. One, of course, is our Smart Grid outreach, which is ongoing and continues today. We have obviously outreach programs that we've put in place for our water rate proposal. So we are on track with our outreach. And finally, under legislation and regulation, we are in very, very good shape. With the addition of our legislative analyst, we've been able to put together a legislative and regulatory plan that we are following. We have been much, much more aggressive in those areas and been able to actually influence some of the legislation, particularly at the statewide level, that could have had a detrimental impact on Glendale. So overall, we're in relatively good shape. There are certain areas where we're behind schedule. Most of those are due to budgetary constraints, but in many other cases, we've pushed ahead where we can. So that's a summary. I'd be happy to take some questions.
Well, I just want to announce that Commissioner Armenian just joined us, just for the record. Can you open up the questions?
I had a question. This may be actually spelled out in the strategic plan, which I haven't reviewed in detail recently. But on the City of Glendale, Section 9, which has the various communication elements, what are your success measures on that? How do you measure whether or not you're tracking against goal?
That comes back to our surveys. And we do surveys generally twice a year to measure the impact of various initiatives, impact of new initiatives, also customer satisfaction, of course, but we do it through survey results.
Thank you. And on 7.4, which is the achieve annual utility average OSHA incident rate of 2.0, is that in reference to 2 OSHA recordables? Or is that the 2.0, is that actual OSHA recordables, or is that referring to something else?
Okay, no. What 2.0 is a function of hours worked versus reportables versus lost time. And so it's a formula. 2 is a utility standard that if you're above it, you need to do something to improve it. So 2 is basically the utility standard for that, but it's a function. It's a formulaic type of thing.
Got it. So the actual goal is probably less than 2. Your actual goal would be less than 2, not to actually achieve 2.
That's correct, yes.
'Cause right now it reads as achieve annual utility.
It would be 2 or less, you're
Yeah.
correct, yes. Right, we need to change that.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Goals 5.3 and 6.2 are related to your capital budget, one for water, one for power. And those are being supported by bonds, I take it, by bond sales that we had
Partially.
recently. Yeah.
Partially.
But they're being adversely affected by the rate issue.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on the relationship between the rate and the bonds?
Okay. The issue we have is that with reduction in revenue, which would normally offset some, not necessarily all, of the capital expenditures, we no longer have that cushion for us to fund from our own revenues. Mm-hmm. So what's occurred is, in order to offset that, we've pushed out projects that we originally had shown in here. In fact, they're still, if you go to the back to the detail mm-hmm. on where we are, you'll see there's projects that we had shown within the 5-year horizon that now have been pushed out. Some of those were basically financed internally from our own revenues, and some through bonding. Okay, and it's hard to say which ones are which. We don't necessarily, in every case, determine that this one's through a bond and this one isn't. So when you take those two issues and the fact that we haven't bonded, we now have had to push out capital projects.
Okay. Can we confidently quantify the delays that will occur in your implementations schedule for these capital programs?
Yes, in fact, we'll show that to you when we, not today, but I forget, is it next month? When we give you the capital program, we'll show you that.
And presumably it will also be discussed when we talk about the rates with customers and the council.
That's correct.
Okay. And then on goal number 1.2, which is serve 2,500 acre-feet per year of recycled water, you mentioned a budgetary plan was not developed yet. Is that also being affected by the rates and the way that goals 5.3 and 6.2 are?
Well, to a degree it is.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because we are currently focused on getting back to a minimal point with water rates, potable water rates. Mm-hmm. We have focused on that, and for the moment, put aside the issue of financing the recycled system, because that is another increase that will create another increase somewhere, either in the overall potable rate for everyone or just for specific recycled users. So what we've done is we've temporarily postponed any discussion on that until we get through the issue of the potable water rate increase.
You mentioned a budgetary plan then being developed specifically for 1.2, which is the recycled water
That's
program.
correct.
And when do you anticipate that plan would be developed?
Well, we actually have developed a plan. What we have not done is brought it to you or brought it to the City Council.
Okay.
We need to see where we stand overall on
Okay.
water rates before we do that.
And presumably that'll be discussed under the agenda forecast?
Yes.
Okay. Finally, I have one last question on 1.1, which is your production of 3856 acre-feet per year from Verdugo Basin. There was a safe yield study that was going to be performed. Was that for San Fernando Basin, or was it also for Verdugo Basin? Only?
Commissioner Miller, that was for San Fernando, for the record.
Thank you. And we're confident then that Verdugo Basin can sustain this yield over the long term?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Jamian?
A question. On these items that are behind schedule, is there any way to have you guys forecasted out how behind we are? Is there?
Yes.
And, I mean, for future reporting, can we see roughly if you guys have estimated how behind are we behind? 6 months, a year, 2 years?
We have done that. So, yes, we can provide that for you. Yes.
So, Commissioner Jimmy, you done? I just have a couple of questions on power supply.
Sure.
As some of you may have received in the mail about this dirty coal, that accusing, I guess, GDP of using dirty coal, continuing to generate power by coal power plant. And so in power supply...
It's like this.
Yes, something like that, exactly.
Something like that.
So can you clarify for the public what that direct mail is about versus your power supply renewable portfolio challenge, and also the GHG emissions and how that relates to this mailer?
Yes, it can. And what you're referring to is this mailer that I believe most residents received. I don't know if all of them received it, but it was not just in Glendale. It was done in a number of the SCAPA cities, Burbank, for example, I believe Anaheim. In fact, I know it was Anaheim. I think Riverside also. Pasadena received these last year, so we're a year behind. But let me explain what that's about. We currently participate in 2 coal projects, IPP, the Intermountain Power Project in Utah, and the San Juan Project in New Mexico. Between the 2 of those, they produce about 36-37% of all of our energy. The thing to note with those 2 projects are that they're very reliable. They're what we refer to as base load plants, which are the most reliable in our system, and they're also relatively inexpensive. They are probably, depending upon the time of year, the least expensive of all of our energy sources. There's a long history associated with why we have become part of those plants, and it goes back a number of years when natural gas was not available for any kind of generation. There was a moratorium. We're not allowed to build anything on natural gas, and of course we're not allowed to build nuclear plants here in California. So the only options that were allowed at the time were coal. And actually they've turned out to be extraordinarily good options for us. So while, yes, it's true that we are depends again, it could be anywhere from 33 to 37% of our total portfolio is coal. It's a good thing. It's helped us from a reliability standpoint, and it maintains a fairly good cost structure for us. The contracts that we're in on San Juan goes to 2023. The contract for IPP goes to 2027. So we are in those contracts at least until those dates. We have done, as I mentioned earlier, a number of things to offset our carbon emissions, and most of that is through either renewables, where we're one of the highest percentage renewables in the state, and through energy conservation and efficiency. So we're working very diligently to offset our carbon emissions while maintaining our interest in the coal plants. So yes, that's what this is about. I would argue that a dirty cloud does not hang over Glendale, but that's what that's about.
So that's why you show on your scoreboard that you're meeting these goals as your key indicators.
Yes.
Even though we have up to 37% power from coal plants, but it still shows that the other portion come from natural gas, renewable energy, which is a good thing.
That's correct.
And then we'll continue to reduce generation from coal as our contract expires.
That is correct, yes.
Great, thanks for clarification. Sure. Any other questions or comments?
There are a couple of items here that I forgot to mention. On the workforce, you mentioned that we have goal 7.1, continually improve job satisfaction of our employees, and that we're behind on that. I didn't quite understand what's making us fall behind on that particular goal.
Well, we've discussed in the past our relative position from a competitive standpoint, from a salary standpoint and so on. And in some cases, not all, in some cases, our position has slipped a little bit. And so that has, in some cases, and I want to be very specific, this is not GWP-wide, but it certainly is, has affected some of our job categories.
Have we conducted any employee surveys?
We are currently doing so.
Okay. Do we have any history of previous surveys indicating?
No.
We don't. Okay, so this would be a first.
Correct.
Okay. And can the Commission do anything to assist in this issue of?
Not at the moment.
Okay. And also, I wanted to commend the utility, General Manager Steiger, and all the employees for being either on target or ahead of expectations with most of these goals. That's a lot of very good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? Michelle?
This is just from a general perspective. If I remember correctly, this strategy is a multi-year strategy. What are your points at which you will do reviews to adjust the strategy as necessary if the goals are not realistic?
Once a year, we do a complete review. We did it earlier this year, back in February and March, and we did a complete review. And what we did is we updated the time frames, and also in a couple of cases we changed the actual goal. We changed the initiatives because they didn't apply anymore. We will do that again, since I mentioned that now we're going to, instead of a calendar year, we're going to a fiscal year. We'll do that again next year, probably in the May time frame. So we will do it once a year.
Thank you.
There's no additional comments or questions. I'd like to invite public speakers.
Excuse me.
Okay.
I just want to do one more thing, and then if you don't mind.
yeah, okay, sure.
This will be real quick. And this is, because it just happened, we didn't get a chance to really make it a separate agenda item, but it does tie right into our strategic plan. I just wanted to show you where we were last week. We set an all-time system peak record on the electric side of 343 megawatts. That's the highest we've ever seen. And you can see it hit about 4 o'clock in the afternoon a week ago, Monday. And this gives you a sense of what our normal curves look like as you go underneath that. So just wanted to mention that to you because it's important to note that we did it without the use of any kind of load shedding at all that our system endured. And better yet, we had very little problem with our distribution system, which under those kinds of heat conditions is somewhat unusual, and it speaks volumes in terms of the kind of reliability investments we put in the system over the last few years. So I just wanted to show that to you, and I think that shows it in a different way. As you can see how from September 25th, 26th, 27th, it built up. Those are the daily load curves. You can see where they peaked out, and then finally went back down on the 28th. But it is an all-time record. Just wanted to bring that. I'm sorry.
I wanted to actually, since you brought this up, I wanted to also ask a question because I think it will be interesting for those who are viewing this, customers who are viewing this, and that is, in this future scenario where we have the smart meters deployed, what sort of scenario could you envision if we're hitting peak loads like this where the customer gets engaged in helping manage and level out that sort of peak load so that it doesn't force the utility to move to more drastic actions in terms of outages or that sort of thing?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it is critical that when we have the smart grid in place, we'll be able to a degree, control that, rather than just let it go to wherever it's going to go. What we'll try to do is shave that peak somewhat, offset some of the energy usage, all through smart grid control and also through communications with the customer directly, and they can see exactly where they stand in that, along with a demand response program for our larger customers, which we're putting in place as we speak right now. So if this were to occur a year from now, it would most likely be a very different scenario. Smart grid would kick in, would start to smooth that load. Our demand response would also work with smart grid and lower it even more. And that would give us, even though we did fine, we did okay, it's always good to have a degree of reserve so that you don't have to push the system to the limit. And that's what we would do in the future. So thank you.
In other words, we could see a scenario where GWP might ask customers to maybe put off doing their laundry or their dryers in the evening hours, or ask them to participate in the reduction of demand during those peak hours.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it sounds like this is a very reliable system because we were able to meet the demand. What about the cost side? I mean, there's a cost associated with reaching the all-time peak. Did we factor that in?
I can't tell you what the cost was because it was only a week ago, but I can tell you that when you go to a peak like that, there's no question that that last 5% of energy is extraordinarily expensive. So I'll know that probably within the next couple of weeks, and I could report back. It's a good question.
Especially how we were able to hedge any if.
Yes, and we do hedge some of it, but still, when you get an all-time peak like that, you're outside of your hedge. You've exhausted it.
Mr. Miller, do you have?
No, I don't.
All right, this time I'd like to invite the public to speak. Mr. Herbert Milano, please. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, President Yao, members of the Commission, and City staff. My name is Herbert Milano. I would like to first ask if I'd like to speak on 8 items on the strategic scorecard, and I hope that you could be a little bit flexible with my time if I go over the 5 minutes. I'd like to start with my perception of item 3.1, which is customer service. According to this self-evaluation, it appears that the utility consistently achieves above-average customer satisfaction, and the goal is on schedule or is meeting expectations. So I wonder, where does the potential customer constrained with their ability to pay come into this? If a customer is not able to pay their utility bill because they don't have the money, or the electrical fees are high, how does that show up in here, and what is the measure that you use to evaluate that? I think that is an integral part of customer satisfaction. If I go take a car to a mechanic and he charges me twice what I was expecting, the car may work well, but I may not be a happy customer. So where does it show up? How do we measure the level of strain that many utility ratepayers have with regard to the charge of electricity? I looked at my own, and I'm paying well over 21 cents per kilowatt hour average for the past 3 years, continually. Item 3.2, ensure that all affected customers and public are consistently notified. Well, the utility has had several meetings with the public, the last one at the Spar Heights Community Center. And if it were not for the active search for information by one of the 2 individuals who showed up, the number of the public that would have shown up for that meeting would have been zero. Zero. I happen to know both individuals who attended that meeting, and they told me to the effort that they needed to do to pick up the phone, make the calls, and say, when is the meeting going to take place, and where exactly is it going to be? If it were not for them, you would have had zero participation. Now, we pay a significant amount of money to many of these people in this utility. To have a zero show from the public on an issue having to do with water rates, and you give yourself a satisfactory? Not in my book. 4, rates. Reduce electrical rates by 35%. It says that you're on schedule. You're nowhere on schedule. From the time this was established to now, we should have expected some reductions. And as I just mentioned to you, I am paying probably one of the highest residential electrical rates in California. Find anywhere where anyone is paying an average of more than 21 cents a kilowatt hour. We're at least 60% above Burbank. and above Los Angeles as well. And you name any city where we actually are paying that, and that's what I'm paying. On my apartment building, I pay over 21 cents per kilowatt hour, consistently. Item 5, replace or rehabilitate 25 miles of pipeline. Now, I applaud the utility for giving yourself a rating, that is a red. But what I'm really concerned with is that when the planning takes place with regard to the money necessary for infrastructure repair, we really don't know. We really don't get to see year to year what the actual backlog is of that infrastructure. We had a little bit of transparency this past month at one of the meetings we had at the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council. And in that meeting, some documents were presented with regard to the significant amount of asset or capital improvements that would have to be postponed if there is no rate increase. It's incredibly significant. And I think that this commission needs to truly address, to figure out what is the requirement that this city needs to have in terms of funding to make sure that that infrastructure gets addressed, and it's addressed this year and for next year and so forth. What is it going to take to get that infrastructure up to date? Item 6.5 is the same deal. Item 8, implement the smart grid system. I'm running out of time, Mr. Yao. I was sort of wondering if you can allow me to have a couple more minutes.
Maybe cover that in your oral comments.
Okay. You canceled the meeting last month, and we had a presentation made at the City Council with concerning change orders to the smart grid system on one of the most crucial and basic components of the system, which is the backup and the redundancy needed to have it at someplace else. Now, I believe that you hired, or the GWP hired, a professional project management team. So I asked myself, how could you miss that portion of the system that was not included? Think about it. I'm out of time. May I have a couple more minutes here?
Mr. President Yao, if he wishes to speak on an agenda item, he would be limited to speaking during the discussion of that item. He couldn't speak to that during oral comments. That said, it's within your discretion to accept or deny the request for extended time.
You can have one more minute if you can wrap it up quickly.
All right. I just want to say that I don't understand why the meeting was canceled last month, and I figure that the opportunity for the public to come to speak, it's really essential. Develop optimal, item 9.2, develop optimum transfer level for mutual benefit. The transfer of monies from the Glendale Water and Power, especially the water utility, to the city general fund, has been time and time again being presented throughout California, challenging the law, and I urge Mr. Armenian to take a look at many of the complaints being made to the grand jury in Sacramento and to the other legal cases where it renders this type of transfers illegal and against the Constitution of California. And it is incredibly important because the very fact that the utilities infrastructure has been delayed significantly, it means that those transfers were never truly justified, and it violates also the city charter. Because you cannot make those transfers unless you are appropriately providing those monies for the proper functioning of the utility. I got more to say, but you only gave me 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. And just to, for record, we did have a meeting last month, which was just delayed by a week. So I think that was appropriately notified. Any other comments?
Well, and I also wanted to highlight that the city attorney's office is currently looking into the other issue that Mr. Milano pointed out, which has specifically to do with water transfers, not electric transfers.
I had a question regarding the claim of 3.1, the customer satisfaction survey being a self-evaluation. Could you elaborate, Mr. Steiger, on the CMUA survey, what that means exactly then?
Our customer satisfaction surveys are done by an independent firm, surveys at least twice a year. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, the kinds of questions that are asked reflect the same type of inquiry that Mr. Milano mentioned. If our customers are unhappy with our rates, that will come through, and it does at times. So there's no question that the survey, which is not done by GWP, the independent survey, will recognize any type of dissatisfaction with GWP, and we recognize that.
cost is included as one of the parameters of customer satisfaction.
Cost and value, yes.
Okay. And then on goal 5.3, which has to do with the replacement or rehabilitation of 25 miles of pipe, there is a claim of poor transparency on that, but during the capital improvement program review, you talk about the goal for the particular year, the number of pipes, or let me say, number of miles of pipes that are to be replaced.
We do.
Okay. That's all I have at this point.
And just to echo your last item on the pipe replacement, as I recall during the last month's meeting that Mr. Kavunas gave a very honest feedback on the impact on rates. If we don't get the rate increase, then the maintenance and the capital project impacts the reliability and also the criticalness of the upgrades that are necessary. So that was part of the transparency that Mr. Kavunas gave, as I recall in the last meeting.
Yes. I'd like to also mention that all of our water rate meetings were noticed. They were right on the front of our webpage. As soon as you went to our webpage, you couldn't help but see it. And it was also noticed in the news press, the Glendale news press.
Additional comments or questions? No, let's move on to the next item, please.
Item 3B, update Prop 23, Lana Haddad.
Lana is not here, but I would like to briefly go over this issue. Proposition 23 was introduced back in December of last year. The intent is to put a moratorium on the implementation of AB 32. And AB 32 is the California law which specifies the reduction of greenhouse gases to 1990 levels, one that we here in Glendale have already supported and agreed to do. In fact, we're on our way to doing it, as I mentioned earlier. This particular proposition would put a moratorium on that implementation until the statewide unemployment rate reached 5.5% and maintained that for 4 consecutive quarters. Well, I won't go into all the detail associated with that. We strongly support the reduction of greenhouse gases. We strongly support the increased reliance on renewable energy, which is part of AB 32, and also the increased reliance on energy efficiency and conservation, also part of AB 32. So we are bringing this to your attention. We recommend an opposed position on this. However, we're not asking you to take a position. We're just giving you our opinion, and hopefully you'll understand what this is about, and any questions I can certainly answer for you.
Questions or comments? Well, I just applaud you and staff for taking a position on that, because as we are all Californians, we're stakeholders of our air quality, and I know a lot of utilities have an opposed position as well in Prop 23, and so I think it's appropriate that all California utility would all be united and oppose Prop 23 against outside influence. So I commend you for bringing this up and recommending an opposed position.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Item 3C, update water rates, Peter Kavunas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I wanted to give you a brief update on the water rate increase process that we're undergoing right now. And let's see, George, can you help me with the slides? Or I can do that. Thank you. We have a, let me go back. We have a brief presentation for you today, just covering four key topics: the impact of the water rate change, just a refresher on our finances and what it means to our customers, where we are in the Prop 218 notification process, the results of our community outreach, and the status for the request for proposals for a new rate design that we have issued. So on the first slide, just a refresher on the finances for this year. The approved budget that we have for the year projects revenues of $26.4 million over base expenses of $24.3 million. That were to go through, we'd have a net income of loss of $2.1 million, and we make up most of that by the difference in the adjustable rate revenues versus expenses, which gives us a $2.2 million loss. So the idea was we'd make out okay on the base rates, and we would lose out on the adjustable, taking monies out of the adjustable reserves and coming out pretty even for the year. This assumes the rate increase goes through, and as you can see from the numbers, the rate increase is a base rate increase and a adjustable rate decrease for the net effect of 3.8%. One other thing I'd like to point out on this slide is that when we say the base rate expenses are budgeted at 24.3, that budget of 24.3 is what I would refer to as an absolute bare bones budget with significant reductions both in capital and O&M expenses. This is an absolute minimum level. We could have done with another $3.5 million that was taken out of it in order to make the rate increase as low as possible, being sensitive to the current economic times. In terms of the impact to the customer, we're looking at an increase in monthly bills of about $2.33 for the typical residential customer that uses 14,200 gallons per month on a typical bill. And this slide shows you the components. It shows you indeed that the variable charges are going down because we're decreasing the adjustable rate. It shows you the fixed charges going up because we're increasing the base rate. Again, the net effect is a 3.8% increase. For the average residential customer, it's $2.33. And all that's been covered in detail, certainly in previous presentations and at the joint study session that your committee had with the City Council. For a rate increase to go through, we have to comply with the Prop 218 process. We came to you and Council together on June 29th, had the combined session. We got the okay to proceed with noticing the rate increase. That notice was issued on August 12th. And by law, we need to have a 45-day review period during which residents and customers and property owners can protest. And so we're targeting October 12th as the date for the introduction of the ordinance that would actually change the rates. In the meantime, we had 5 community meetings. I'll give you a little more information on that in just a second. And we are going to City Council next week on Tuesday, October 12th, for introduction of the ordinance with the rate increase as has been presented to you in the past. Should the ordinance be introduced, then Council would consider it on the 19th for adoption, and rates go into effect 30 days after. In terms of the community outreach, we had 3 public meetings that were open to the public. As General Manager Mr. Steiger alluded to, these were well noticed. They were on our website. They were in the news press, and I believe posted amply throughout the city. We had very low turnout, which I wouldn't interpret as saying the public wants this rate increase or accepts this rate increase, but at least they understand it. We had 2 customers that showed up. One of them clearly misunderstood the difference between HCF and gallons, and perhaps we could have done a better job in our Prop 218 notice. But once we walked him through what the increase really meant for him, and in his case, his average use was just about the average. When he understood that it was $2.50, he thanked us and walked away. That was our first meeting. The second meeting was 2 members of the public that have a specific concern about the transfer and not necessarily the rate increase in and of itself. And the third meeting, there was, again, 1 resident who had a concern mostly with her electric bill, not so much the water bill. There were two community group meetings. One was the Homeowners Coordinating Council that I gave a presentation to. The other one was the Rotary Club that Mr. Steiger gave a presentation to. We got into really good discussion. Some of the topics that we got into were the theme of self-sufficiency. Is we've deferred a tremendous amount of capital, and that needs to stay deferred even with a rate increase. But what have we kept have been projects that will help us lead towards self-sufficiency by drilling more wells and allowing us to address the larger portion of our budget, which is MWD purchased water. The more we can have from our local resources, the less we have to buy from MWD, the more reliable and stable our expenses become. We addressed AMI, of course. That's a community-wide impact on this project, a community-wide benefit of this project. We talked about capital funding and what's been deferred. We talked about the general fund transfer and how that may or not affect. My perspective, as I've explained to the Commission before and I've explained to the public, is that this rate increase is needed even if the general fund transfer were to not happen this year. Considering how much money has been cut from the budget, this general fund transfer is immaterial in my mind. I understand there's a whole other side to the constitutionality, and those are the challenges that the City Attorney's Office is considering from a money point of view, funding the operation, maintenance, and capital investment in your water utility. To me, it's immaterial. This rate increase is absolutely essential. And finally, we covered the comparison with surrounding utilities and showed the public the information that shows our average monthly bill is smack dab in the middle of the utilities that serve in the immediate vicinity. Burbank, Pasadena, a little bit lower. Crescenta Valley Water District in Los Angeles, a little bit higher. And we're smack dab in the middle. Long term, we need to have a better rate design. What we've had has been good. But as the saying goes, this dog won't hunt anymore. You know, we're in a place now where we got to take a good look at our rates. We got to have a structure that encourages conservation more, rewards conservation more, and incentivizes, especially the high users, to cut back a little bit, while maintaining revenue stability for the water utility. So we don't find ourselves in the position of not having enough money and being buffeted by the economy or by weather or by regulations, as we have been the last few years. The RFP was sent out. We're expecting proposals. I believe November 1st is the due date. We're looking forward to a very good process that involves 2 members of the Commission on reviewing those. And we've had considerable interest in getting our rates reevaluated. In terms of a schedule for that process, you can see that on the screen. The deadline is November 1st. We're looking to have reviews over the next 2 weeks after that, award by the end of November, and then start the engagement once we clear out through the holidays and through any insurance and all the contract signing and everything else that goes with it. Begin in earnest in January, bring a final report briefing to the Commission at the May 2011 Commission meeting, and then look to have a new rate implementation by July 1. So going through a rate process now, we can all look forward to go through it again in the near term. Conclusion, covered the Prop 218 process. We're on schedule for next week. We have had what we consider comprehensive community outreach and felt it was pretty indicative that the rate increase is not a particular concern. It's an understandable increase by the community, and our RFP process is moving forward. I'll be happy to take questions.
I wanted to address an issue, particularly one of your last comments, but this has much broader implications that I think the GWP needs to think about for the coming years, and that is this concept of community outreach and the measurement of success on that. I'm in the communication business, and again, I'm not saying whether something was done correctly or not correctly here. I'm just making a general comment, but 3 public meetings, which is part of the prescribed process, calling some sort of public involvement is part of the prescribed process, but then doing 2 community group meetings, to me, is not community outreach. And we're heading into an era of where, as you noted, there are going to be conceivably additional rate increase proceedings that will have to happen in the coming couple years, whether it be rate redesign, et cetera, as well as moving into an era where the utility business is going to be engaged in a 2-way dialogue with customers as opposed to a 1-way push with the advent of smart grid, where you're going to want customers more engaged in the process of managing energy use and water use. And so I would suggest that the GWP really needs to take a closer look at what it means by what is successful community outreach. What's our definition of community outreach? Not just checking the boxes of if we put an ad in this newspaper or Glendale News Press listed it in the events calendar, or whether we presented at the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council. The community that we describe as our customers is much larger than those particular groups. And I know that the Smart Grid Group has had the same challenge in terms of getting people to come to meetings that are called for the purpose of briefing customers on that particular effort. Just like you called 3 public meetings with just less than half dozen or so customers showing up to those. I think we need to look at it from the perspective of us going to where the people are versus trying to get the people to come to us, because community outreach is a very difficult process on these sorts of issues, especially on issues that are difficult to understand for the layman audience. And so there are many, many community groups, such as the one, such as the Rotary Club and many other community groups in various demographics, that if the GWP would take the proactive step of defining to say, when we need to do community outreach, this is what the standard is for us. It means we're going to hit the following 10 organizations that we believe represent a cross-section of the community. So when we go to brief them on rate redesign or about Smart Grid, future customer programs that are going to be part of Smart Grid, that is really what we would mean by community outreach, as opposed to any prescribed, you got to hold 3 public meetings type of thing. Because I think we lose an opportunity to educate the public about these really important issues, such as this water situation and delayed capital programs, and as we continue to delay these things, what the implications are from a reliability perspective, as well as trying to engage the public on how they can continue to be part of the solution by being more proactive in how they use water, as well as how they use electricity. So I would encourage us, I guess, to take a fresh look at that for the future. I'm using this as an example, but there's been the recent example of Smart Grid community outreach as well, where the same challenge has been there, which there's been only a few people showing up. And I don't think that that's because of lack of interest. Part of it may be lack of understanding, but I think generally it's hard to get people to come out on energy, water, utility type of issues, but yet it's really in the interests of GWP to get more people engaged, because that's the model we're heading toward, is more customer engagement on these issues, because they're an essential part of the solution. It's, you can keep doing rate increases, but really the solution is part about being smarter consumers of water and being smarter consumers of electricity. So I would encourage us, and you, Mr. Kavunas, from the water perspective, as well as other officials at GWP, to take a fresh look at this for future such proceedings.
Thank you. That's a very good suggestion. We are developing a GWP-wide community outreach plan. It's an overall communication strategy. I would like to point out that the 5 community meetings that we had were not prescribed. We did not have to do those. And my sense from going to those is that no matter how many we called, we still would have had a limited number of customers show up. But you're right, it's difficult. And of course, we're very open if there's suggestions as to what other utilities do when they do it better. We're very open to incorporating other concepts.
Yeah, so I appreciate that openness to feedback. My experience has been is that it's better to find where the people are and go to the people, as opposed to trying to get the people to come to us on these issues. And so that really means plugging into different community groups and what their normal meetings might be, where you're already going to have a preset audience, a built-in audience of a large number of people. Dozens of people might show up to luncheons or their community organization meetings. And just like you do with the Glendale Homeowners Coordinating Council, where they are showing up there not just because you're presenting there, but they're part involved in that organization. And so you naturally going there, you hit more people. The objective has got to be to hit more people with your message, so that you can really feel confident that you've reached out to as many people as possible. So I appreciate your taking a look at that and considering that. And if I can provide any further assistance based on my experience, I'm happy to do so.
You have used different media for trying to engage dialogue with the community, of course, not just these meetings, but the internet, the mailers, and so forth, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And, of course, it's come up in multiple times in these commission meetings, and in fact was brought up a year ago when when we first started talking about mandatory conservation, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So I do want to comment, a lot has been done. I think the suggestion that maybe there's some meetings like the Chamber of Commerce or something where there might be a large community representation that you might be able to take advantage of, that would be helpful. But I am impressed by the efforts that the utility has taken for customer outreach. I just wanted to add that on to what Commissioner Armenian stated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kapun, I just have a question about this process. Since we already submitted the Prop 218 notice, is the final step here after today is to go to the City Council, I guess next week?
That's correct.
And then they pretty much say a vote yes or no on the adoption of the ordinance, and then you guys implement if it's approved?
As I understand it, the council is, our recommendation to council is to adopt an ordinance that we have prepared that modifies the existing ordinance on water rates. That ordinance is introduced, then it comes up for a vote a week after. If that, on week after, October 19th, if that is voted in favor and passes, then the rates would go into effect 30 days later.
And this is irrespective of what's going to happen with the water transfer issue?
Yes. As I understand, the challenge to the water transfer has come up by a member of the community. The city attorney's office is considering that. I believe they have commissioned a separate study, and when the study is concluded, they will render their legal opinion to go with it, and that's to come later this year at some point.
Okay. So if the City Council votes to approve the ordinance for the water rate increase, additional, let's say if the City Attorney's Office interprets the law to be unconstitutional in transferring the water, we would have an additional $4 million in addition to the water rate increase.
That's correct.
Okay. Would that change anything?
In my professional opinion, the only thing it changes is that it restores a little bit of the reserves that we are slowly but steadily depleting. We're well below. The City Council adopted reserve policies to have $11.3 million in reserves. We're below half of that at this point. If we had the rate increase, we'd end up with about $6 to $6.5 million in reserves. These reserves are needed for either capital or O&M response, or for rate stabilization, so our rate increases are as moderate as they can be. Reserves are an essential part of running a good, stable utility. So to me, as a first step, this particular fiscal year, if we were to not transfer money to the general fund, I would suggest that we look at that as an opportunity to augment the reserves and get a little closer to meeting the goal, which, by the way, we haven't met since probably 2 years.
But just based on the comments during our joint session with the City Council, some of the members were very adamant about water rate increase due to the current economic conditions. And so potentially that question could come up by
of course.
Members of the council, because they might want to defer additional rate increase if we were to not be able to transfer the water over to general fund. So potentially that plays into this picture of this process. So what is our alternative if the City Council decides that we'll want to hold off on the adoption and wait for the City Attorney's Office to make that determination?
Well, my response will be this. We needed this rate increase to be into effect July 1. We've been losing money on this budget since July 1. So now we can wait a little bit longer to see what the City Attorney's opinion will be, thinking that maybe the transfer will or not be passable. In my mind, we're already short on cash. So if Council were to ask me, I would tell them that the right thing to do by this utility right now serving this city is to pass this rate increase, because that's what's in front of us today. And then when the question comes up to whether the transfer stands or not, we deal with it at that point. We can always change the rates at that point if we feel it's appropriate. But as a manager of the water utility, I can tell you this budget is bare bones. I've said it enough times to the point where I don't know how else to say it, to express it clearly. Our reserves are below where they should be. So if anybody's asking me, what do you do with an extra $4.2 million, I'm not saying I'm going shopping. I'm saying that money needs to be put in the bank because this utility is another living business that also needs to be able to respond to downturns. And if you starve the budget and you starve the reserves, you're running very, very close to a very bad place. So that would be my response. Perhaps Mr. Steiger would have a different one.
I think you said it well.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I don't think it's going to be close, but I'm not sure if we'll have the buy-in of all the city council members, so it's just a matter of more convincing. I'm not sure what else we can do. I mean, I think you have the support, at least for most members of this commission, and I'm not sure if we should maybe do a motion as a recommendation to the city council, or do we just wait until they go through the process?
This is agendized as a report, so it's not within your discretion tonight to make a motion.
We won't be able to meet until next month, and possibly after this has been done with.
No, not unless you call the special meeting.
Do you have any comments about the proceeding and how we should maybe support GWP or not support GWP in their request for this rate increase to the city council? We're going through them next week.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused because we held a meeting, a joint study session with the city council. It was the last time we had an opportunity to have a mutual discussion, but have not had that opportunity since. So I don't know if it was the intention of the city council to, beyond that meeting, get the opinion of their appointed GWP commission or not, but I would think that that would be an appropriate thing to do. So I don't know if there's a way to communicate that back up to city council in an official manner or not.
Well, the study session, as I recall, was for the information. It's more for informational issue. This is more of a vote now, a yes or no, that we should recommend to the city council whether they should adopt this ordinance for a rate increase. So if we want to convey our voice to with GWP staff to the council, then maybe today is the appropriate time.
But I think the assistant city attorney said that we can't do that because it's not on the agenda at this particular meeting. We'd have to call a special meeting for that. And even though the last meeting was a study session, I remember that the city council at that moment polled us, but that was prior to the commission having all the great presentations, very informative presentations that Mr. Kovunis had given about what the implications of the decision are. So I would, if it's not appropriate to do it at this meeting, I do think it's appropriate to convey our point of view as a commission to the city council prior to them voting on that, whether they ask us or whether we do it proactively through whatever
the recommendation
process.
from the assistant city attorney is to not have that a vote or some kind of motion to support or not support GWP in their request for the rate increase. Was that not appropriate?
From the standpoint of the Brown Act, you can't take an action tonight because it's agendized as a report for your information. I can certainly advise you that you could call a special meeting and you can convene and take action on the matter. It may be possible to submit something in writing, but that's something I would need to explore, and I can report back to you.
Something in writing individually?
As a body, but I need to investigate that, and I can report back to you, hopefully by the end of the meeting.
Just for the record, I am willing to meet in a special meeting. I would recommend it be between October 12th, which is the close of review period, and the ordinance adoption on October 19th. Another option for us to consider pending input from the city attorney's office is that we could show up en masse or some group of us at the ordinance adoption and speak at that point before council. That's an option for us to consider. I don't know how the rest of you feel about a special meeting. You may want to opine on that subject.
I would be in support of any steps to express the point of view of the commission to the city council, any of those options that you mentioned, whichever. I'm willing to make the time to do any one of those, because I think it's important that the city council hear from their commission on these sorts of matters.
My preference is actually that we meet prior to the actual ordinance adoption, although it might be helpful also for a couple of us to show up, or maybe all of us at the ordinance adoption.
Sure. Yeah, not sure about that, but just to go back to the joint study session, as Commissioner Armenian referring to, the vote that we took was more of a non-binding vote to proceed with Prop 218 process rather than a vote to increase or not increase the rate. So now is the point where we have to make that decision, or ask a recommendation to the City Council.
No, I agree. I think that was more of a gut call at that in that moment from that presentation. So I don't think we had the benefit of the much deeper information that Mr. Kavunas has provided since. So I think it's appropriate to revisit our discussion at this point, whether it be through a special meeting, which I agree with. I agree with what's been said about that. That is the more appropriate. Commissioner Miller's point of view. I think that's more appropriate. It's on the record, and that way we can have a fuller discussion. I think if that's not an option, then certainly I think a letter would be at least something that would make some sort of official representation from this body.
Well, I'll explore that issue, and when we get to the agenda forecast, we can discuss further.
Great. Okay, are there any additional questions or comments? If not, I'm going to open the floor to a speaker. Thank you, Mr. Kavunas. I'd like to invite Mr. Herb Milano, please. 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, President Yao, members of the Commission and city staff. My name is Herbert Milano. I would like to commend Mr. Kavunas for giving us a clear understanding of the significant precarious situation that the reserve fund has for the Glendale water and power utility, the water utility. And it is that type of transparency that we need all the time. Unfortunately, there are political situations which may prevent Mr. Kavunas from really clarifying a few things that are in some way may appear political. In the year 2000, for example, the capital improvements for the water utility was $3.4 million. And I think that it was insufficient. There were transfers of $2.5 million to the general fund, and so on. So generally speaking, between 2000 and 2007, there were $67 million of capital improvements, but there were almost $23 million in transfers. So it tells us that if the situation with those reserves is as precarious as it is, we needed all of that money to stay within the utility. There was no reason for that transfer to have been made. And according to the city charter, this city has been in violation of the city charter, section 20, paragraph 2, or subsection 2, with regard to the depreciation fund, which consists of sufficient funds from the revenue fund to meet normal depreciation of the waterworks. Okay? And it places very strict restrictions with regard to what is required before you make the transfer, but subject to ensuring the sound financial position of GWP. You cannot make the transfer if you are going to imperil the sound financial position of GWP, and it has occurred. So not only are you in violation of the Constitution of California, but of your own city charter. Now let me continue with a couple more things that are really relevant. If I could have slide number 4, please. I'd like to show something that is incredibly relevant with the way the rates are being structured. Because what we are finding is the following, that if you increase the base rate and not the variable rate, which is the actual usage of water, what you are doing in effect is overloading the fees or the increase on the people who can afford it the least. Which means that if you take a look at this particular chart, you notice that the increase is on the fixed charges, which means that everybody gets hit, regardless of how much conservation you make. And that is totally unfair. Because if you want to have rates that are truly relevant with regard to our proposal for conservation, our promotion of conservation, what you need to do is lower the fixed charges or do away with them altogether and just do a variable charge that accounts for everything. You know, when you go to the gas station, you don't get charged separately for using the pump, or you get charged separately for driving into the gas station with an invoice that says, well, for giving you the gas station, we're going to, and making it available, we're going to charge you this fee every month. It's all included. It's all included in the amount of the gas. The more gas I use, the more I pay. And that is the way it should be for this utility. Although people can, cry up and down that everybody else is doing it that way. Why? You can incorporate all of the costs that are necessary and say, look, we're going to be charging at half a penny per gallon as our base rate. I mean, I'm not averse to having the type of rate increases that will allow the utility, the water utility, to remain viable and for the capital improvements to be covered. It has to remain solvent. But what is really crucial is that those rates be totally dependent upon the amount of the usage. And it will be done. People are not going to be, without water because of the rate changes. People will always have a need for water. And you can establish a base rate of what the minimum usage is. But that has to be corrected because the individuals who are really working hard at conservation are basically going to get a rate increase no matter what. There's a couple of more items that I wanted to say with regard to a performance-based approach. The whole idea of communicating to the public and measuring outcomes, the outcomes is on the people who show up, not on the effort or the intent of publicizing this or publicizing that. You measure it on outcomes. That is the whole idea of performance-based measures. That is the whole idea behind a strategic plan. You have a strategic plan, you set objectives. The objectives for communication is on the people who show up and participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Any comments or questions? Not, let's move on to the next item, please.
If the Commission doesn't have any comments, I'd like to comment on
Okay,
some of
go
the
ahead, Ms.
comments made
Godinez.
by the Speaker. With regard to the charter, I strongly disagree that the transfer is in violation of the city charter. In fact, the charter mandates that the transfer take place. And looking at Article 11, Section 22 of the charter, the wording is that at the end of each fiscal year, an amount equal to 25% of the operating revenue of the GWP for each year shall be transferred to the General Reserve Fund, provided that the Council may annually, at or before the time for adopting the general budget, reduce said amount or wholly waive such transfer if, in its opinion, such reduction or waiver is necessary to ensure the sound financial position of said department. So I think it's a misreading to say that it's required that the transfer not take place. I think that if the Council, in its discretion, makes a finding that there is a need for the money by Glendale Water and Power, then it may reduce the transfer. But the reverse is not true. With regard to the constitutionality under Prop 218, that's something that our office takes very seriously and is investigating, but I don't think it's been determined at this point that the transfer is illegal. So I think that, we should not reach any conclusion yet at this point.
Ms.
If I may,
Godinez.
I'd also like to address one comment regarding the rate structure. George, if you can please put that slide back on. I'd just like the Commission to understand my perspective on the rate structure. What's shown on this slide is the components of the bill. Putting the entire bill on volumetric sales is a good concept in theory, and that is the concept that says if you don't use anything, you shouldn't have to pay anything. And if you use a lot, you should pay. The more you use, the more you should pay. Part of the rate structure study that we're undertaking, starting in January, will look at different rate structures. That's a rate structure that doesn't work from a utility's point of view, and the reason it doesn't work is because we have fixed expenses that need to be met. And for a customer to be on the system and to have the ability to take water whenever they want it, it costs money. Now, perhaps this graph can be improved even more. We're not suggesting that the new rate structure, there would be $40 out of a $63 bill that would be fixed no matter how much water they use. Actually, it would be much less than that. It would be closer to $15. It would be the fixed meter charge. Everything else is recovered from base rates. and it's fixed expenses that we have to cover. So the concept is built in there. It's not as dramatic as Mr. Milano has presented. We have fixed charges that are meter charges or customer service charge that's going to be is going to increase from about $13 a month to $15 a month, and the rest is volumetric based. So if somebody doesn't take any water, then they don't have to pay any more than that. I wanted to clarify that, and again, you'll hear a lot more about appropriate rate structures in the months to come. Thank you.
But Mr. Carbonas, I mean, that begs the question of why didn't GWP fix the fixed charges for the new rate and then just make all the rate increase be put into the variable charge?
Because if we do that, we're creating a situation where when customers cut back on their use, then they feel, then the utility gets significantly underfunded. I mean, that's the fundamental problem with putting the entire revenue on volumetric sales, is that the minute demand goes down, the utility does not recover its cost of doing business. And then what happens?
I thought we're basing these rate increase based on a forecasted usage. So we're assuming at 10%, right, or even if we want to assume at higher conservation, then you would maybe put those increases in the variable accordingly.
It is. We do base it on. We do make projections of sales, and that is, we take our total expense that's projected for the year in the budget. We take our total sales and try to come up with a rate that matches that. Again, if it were all volumetric based, then the projected rates and the rate increases would be all over the place, and you would have some years where we'd have to increase rates dramatically, not $2 a month. And then some years where you'd have to cut back rates because you sold a lot more than you thought. The volumetric approach has a fundamental weakness, although in theory it sounds fair. But what's really fair is for a utility that serves an entire community to be funded by the entire community to be in service year after year. And for that you need some base, some fixed component that the utility can count on, and then the rest can be based on sales.
It's somewhat analogous to a hedge fund, I would say, in a way. You're hedging your variable costs by having fixed costs to cover the different expenses you have, some of which are fixed and some of which are variable.
Thank you, Mr. Kulinas. Next item, please.
Item 3D, electric 5-year plan, Ramona Blegg.
And I'm going to ask Henry Abrari, in the absence of Mr. Abweg, to give this presentation.
Thank you. Can we have the presentation on the board? Wait. Good evening, President Yao, Chairman of the members of the Commission. My name is Henry Abrari. I'm the Principal Electrical Engineer, and I'm here today to give you an overview of electrical section's 5-year plan. You should have received a copy of the full plan. For more details, you can refer to that plan. However, what we are doing today is giving you highlights of this plan. Basically, what we are doing here is reviewing the goals and objectives of the plan, basically as a total, and then we're reviewing our performance against the plan, including our accomplishments for the last year. Also, our goals for the upcoming new year, and we'll touch on 2 key projects that we are currently working on. The electrical plan focuses on transmission and distribution infrastructure, and basically what it is our roadmap to meet our strategic goals that has been set forth for us. Our capital projects improve our infrastructure, and consequently that improves the system reliability and efficiency, and it increases our distribution capacity and redundancy. Another component of an electrical plan is new technology, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later on, how that is affecting our system and how that's improving it. And our last component is compliance, and those are the requirements by NERC and WEC, NERC being North America Electrical Reliability Corporation, and WEC being Western Electric Coordinating Council. And how are we meeting those compliance requirements that we are required to abide by? The electrical plan supports the strategic goals that were identified in GWP's strategic plans. It provides guidance for defining priorities and gives us vision to manage our projects effectively. It helps us manage those projects effectively, and by implementing those projects, we can actually improve our customer service. We can have better reliability indices, and by applying new, how are we going to achieve those indices, you may ask, and that's by applying new technology, as I'll get into in a little bit. We will also, with the new technology, we are able to actually measure and manage our performance. Our electrical plan, what are our strategic goals? Our strategic goals was to have our 69 kV transmission system converted to, all our transmission system converted to 69 kV, but by 2014. Also, we wanted to have all our distribution system converted to 12 kV by 2020. We would have liked to have new relays by 2018, and to reduce the number of preventable outages to less than 25 per year by 2014. Implement an effective asset management and GIS by 2013, and implement the distribution automation plan by 2020. That last item, the distribution automation plan, was brought upon our commitment to the Smart Grid program, and it's a very important component of that. Some of our 2009 programs and projects, our major substation projects, as you may know, is our Gorrieta substation reconstruction project. I will touch on that in a little bit in depth in a little bit later. That's scheduled to be completed by 2011, and that project is on target as we speak. Our next substation project is our Grandview substation replacement project, which is scheduled to be completed by 2013. We are currently working on the RFI packages for that project. This project is also on target. Our distribution programs, as I referred earlier, we have our 12 kV conversion program. It's an ongoing program. In the Gorrieta area, where we're working on right now, that whole area has been converted to 12 kV as we speak, and it is energized at 12 kV. And it's basically being fed out of our Rossmoyne and Montrose substations. And once Gorrieta substation, the new Gorrieta substation comes online, all those feeders will be transferred over to the new station. Grandview area conversion, that is going on as we speak, and by 2013, when Grandview substation will come online, those areas will all be converted to 12 kV and be fed from the new stations. Overall, we are basically reconstructing 4 feeders per year, and we are on target on that. We are also, another component of our system to improve reliability. We basically have a program to coordinate our relaying and the fusing that we have on our systems out in the field. We are currently on 4 per year schedule, and that's on target. We are also completing, we actually, one of our goals was to complete 2 vaults per year. These are reconstruction vaults. These are vaults that are, they need to be reconstructed. They're pretty much very labor intensive. And we have completed only 1. And frankly, the reason is in order to meet some of our other commitments, such as Gorita substations. And I just want to tell you, as part of that substation, we went ahead and installed 4 vaults. So that's kind of pushing us back in that. But we feel that by next year we'll be on schedule on that area also as well. Our feeder extensions for switching, this program is ongoing, and we are meeting that goal as need arises. New technology. As I mentioned earlier, new technology is the area where we are going to use to improve our system, and it can do a lot for us. These are new applications and tools that we are on target in all those areas. Sonnet communication that was completed in 2009. That's a system is used for our switching our fiber network backbone that will actually help our relaying and resolve the couple of key reliability issues that we had. It's been great. Our SCADA system just came online. We just completed it in 2010. And also AMI Smart Grid, OMS Outage Management System, GIS Geographic Information System, and AMS Asset Management System. They're all scheduled to be completed by 2013. Overall, the first 2 projects were completed, and the next 4 are online, on target. Regulatory and compliance. The NERC and WECC, the WIC reliability, we are on target on those. Our registration has been completed. We have trained our staff. We've made sure that all our records is in line. In case of an audit, we seem to be ready for any audit that may take place. And that's been completed. And as you may also know, as we presented last year, we were awarded a platinum award by basically a RP3 Platinum award by APPA. That award was awarded to us because of the reliability goals that we've met, safety and training programs that we've had, and the improvements that we made to our basically capital improvements that we've made to our systems. GEO 165 inspections, that's a requirement, that's an ongoing. And what we do with that, of course, is we have regular inspection of all our vaults and poles, and by actually identifying and any potential safety issues and potential failures, we've been able to improve the reliability on the systems. What are our goals for next year? Transmission, Ross Point Montrose line, I'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about the major projects, the key projects that I'm going to be speaking about. That's very closely intertwined with Gorita substation. Glendale Howard underground cable replacement is a project where we're replacing all the underground cable for our Glendale Howard transmission line. Substation and relay production, Gorita substation, all the relays will be microprocessor controlled state-of-the-art relays that would also work hand in hand with smart grid. so we can have total control on that. Glendale Howard transmission lines have been replaced with, again, with new relays. And we are also, another project that we have that's is on target is 12 kV station at Glendale Rack. We are actually installing a transformer at Glendale Rack that will supply the power to our utility operations center. Currently, the service for the buildings at our UOC is being fed from either Ross Point substation or Western substation. So by having that as a local transformer, that would improve the reliability and reliability for that for our UOC. Our distribution for our distribution system, our goals are we have, as I mentioned earlier, 9 Gorilla feeder circuits will be added. These are as part of Gorilla substation reconstruction project. We are also replacing 2 vaults 1061 and 1136. We are installing 4 sectionalizers on number 8 Montrose. That will help reliability as these sectionalizers are automatically controlled, and in the event of a fault, they can actually reduce the outage time substantially. And we can I'll get to that at the end of the presentation. We are also going through the basically recabling number 8 Shoal, and quite a bit of, about 50% of that has already been completed. Our refusing program is ongoing. We are coordinating all the fuses in the field. That again, that will rather than taking the whole feeder out, we are concentrating the fault to the area where the fault occurred, and not taking the whole feeder out. Technology. What our goal as far as technology is, one is to implement the GIS system. We're working on that as we speak, and that would take into implementation our easement, all our easement plans for our right-of-way section, as well as our fiber optics plans. They will all be on an overlay by GIS overlay, so it can be used by other departments as well as us. Also, our AMI proof of concept should be completed soon. And distribution automation, what we are doing with our distribution automation program is that we have a pilot program, which is a 2-year program. Once that program is completed, at the same time we'll have an implementation plan, a modeling system, and OMS, outage management system, AMS, TILM programs that will be integrated into the distribution automation DA program that we have. AMS is asset management system, and TILM for transformer loss management system. Love those acronyms. Our key projects. What we have, as far as our key projects, we're going to review 2 key projects that we have right now. Our Gorilla substation, as we talked about earlier on. Gorilla substation has, of course, first the station itself. We're installing 3 new transformers. These transformers will give us a capacity of 75 megawatts. Which is tripling the capacity of the Gorilla substation that was existing, which doesn't exist anymore right now. And the transmission line, the configuration with the transmission line before was that we had 2 lines that ran from our Rossman substation over to Montrose. But one of those transmission lines is actually going to go through Gorilla substation and loop through and then feed the Montrose substation. What that does for us is that it helps our flexibility in the operation of those transmission system, as well as improving the reliability that it offers to our customers. Our distribution system that we need to put in as a result of a Gorilla substation. As I said, new substructure has been put in at this point. I would say about 90% is in. We'll have a more detailed report on that, I believe, and then as well as an on-site visit on November 9th, I believe it is. But the substructures, a substantial amount of substructure work has been done. 4 vaults installed. Our overhead construction, as we touched earlier, all the feeders have been converted to 12 kV. And technology, all the new relaying are state-of-the-art microprocessor-based relays. And our relay protection is, again, a state-of-the-art relay protection that we have on that side. This is, as you recall, how Gorilla substation looked before, and it's all been demolished. If you go to gorillasubstation.com, we actually have on-site webcams that you can take a look at the site, as well as a 2-week look ahead on the construction schedule, or any notices that we may have. What I'm going to do right now is actually go over to one of the live cameras. You can see the most recent picture. As you can see, the foundations for all the structures are in. The walls are going up as we speak, and by the end of the month, looks like the structure will be in. The transformers have been manufactured. They'll be installed by the end of this month, as well as the 69 kV switchgear, SF6 switchgear, that it's at the last process, basically stages of acceptance testing, and will be delivered in November. Let's go back to yeah, good. Thank you. And this is how Gorilla substation is going to look for us. As you can see, not only it's improving the reliability of our system in that area, in Verdugo Woodlands and in that area of the city, but also it's quite a nice addition to the city in that area, improvement over what was there before. Our key project number 2 is our distribution automation, and as I mentioned before, this was a project that is brought about by the Smart Grid program. As with other key projects, the DA will touch on several areas of our electrical systems. The main focus will be on reliability and efficiency of our distribution system through the application of new technology and by integration of intelligent devices and operating systems. All this is being made possible through the advancements in communication technology, which allows us to get more data from all field devices, including the smart meters. The DA will convert these to useful information to help us determine where our challenges will be. The smart integration of software applications, systems, and devices to collect and process information to basically improve our reliability, manage our system assets, operate our systems centrally, and enhance safety, also to increase system efficiency. What I'm going to do, in order to accomplish what I just said, we'll need to install devices in the field with some intelligence. These devices themselves are not different than the existing devices we have right now. However, the difference is the controllers that allows us to program and to respond as we design. We can also communicate with remotely and talk to these and get data to aid us in understanding how to make improvements in our system. These are some of the devices that we are using right now, except that they'll be a little bit more smarter when we get the new generation of them. We'll have switches, but these switches will be motor operated. reclosers, sectionalizers, fault indicators and sensors, capacitor banks that will be they at any one point they will look at the system and make measurements and come online when they have to, and or substation relays. This is a distribution automation flow chart that these controllers along with the meters will be integrated with intelligent systems. When we are able to process this near real-time data, these systems will give us a close look at what's happening in our system. The TILM, for example, the Transformer Load Management System, will provide us loading information for transformers. As you may recall, we had a scorcher on September 27th, as Mr. Steiger mentioned earlier. When we establish a new peak, presently we predict transformer loading using billing data that's 30 to 60 days old. With DA, we can link our TLM program so that we can react faster and ensure that during those hot days, we may be able to prevent a transformer from overloading. In this heat wave, for example, we lost 4 transformers. We should be able to control that. These systems will be integrated to create an automated response when there is a system problem. And let me demonstrate to you how this works. I'm going to go to the last. This is how a system set up as we speak. Basically, what you have is we have 2 feeders that basically are connected through a switch, but that switch is open, and we have, for example, an extension of feeder 1 in this area, an extension in that area. When a fault happens between feeder 1 and switch 1. Presently, what happens is that takes out this whole portion of the system, which could be the whole feeder, it could be a number of customers. But by having the DA, this DA system would be a self-correcting system that can at any moment realize that the fault is located between switch 1 and feeder 1, and consequently open switch 1 and close switch 2, and actually put this portion of the feeder back online, which would help our reliability and make sure that the number of customers that we have de-energized is held to a minimum. Other than that, I can entertain any questions that you may have.
Questions?
Just a couple of comments and a question.
Sure.
First of all, thank you very much for that comprehensive report. It seems like you're not doing much over there at GWP.
Yeah, you're keeping busy.
I also wanted to say very commendable in terms of the Glorieta substation and the information that you're providing the community, especially with the live webcams. I think that's a very innovative way to keep the community involved in every step of the difficult process of constructing something like that. My question is a general one, but I think something that could help drive some attention. Out of all these things that you're describing, what are the 1 or 2 things that are keeping you up at night that worry you out of all these areas of activity?
Well, like I said, I mean, in a perfect system, as long as you set all the wheels in motion, you stand back and you look at the coordination of all these systems. Again, the 2 key systems that we have, the wheels are in motion. Our Glorieta project is moving forward very nicely. We are moving on Grandview substation. That's now we are getting that going. That's going to be a nice challenge for us, and of course DA. DA is going to be very interesting, and we're really looking forward to it. That involves quite a bit of new technology, and we're very excited about it.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Yes, I had a question. although I think we've heard this before, I believe about 8 or 10 months ago, there was a presentation by Mr. Fox on the performance of the utility with respect to its projects in terms of schedule and budget. And as I recall, it was, I'll have to use the phrase excellent, not recalling any of the particular data pertaining to it. But nearly all the projects were on schedule and under budget, as I recall.
That's correct.
Yeah. And I see the general manager is confirming that. And that gives us reason to think that all of these projects will also be on target. I see that you've listed them as such, and I think that's an important thing to indicate that we have a good record of performance here, and we expect that these projects also will be completed according to schedule and budget. And your projects are also all being motivated, or mostly motivated, by the strategic plan. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I was just going to suggest maybe in future presentations on your capital improvement programs, both in water and power, when you talk about particular projects, you might kind of indicate which part of the strategic plan they're tied into. It might help a little bit. It's important for the public not only to know that you're performing outstandingly with respect to schedule and budget, but also that you're performing, let's say, conservatively, that you're not doing budgets that aren't related really to a close analysis of what is needed for public benefit.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? If not, thank you. I'd like to invite the public speaker at this point.
All right. Thank you.
Barry. This is the agenda item you want to speak to, right, Mr. Milano? Okay. Please, to the podium, please. 5 minutes.
President Yao, members of the Glendale Water and Power Commission, my name is Herbert Molano. As you know, I have sat through these presentations for now, 4 or 5 years, sometimes 9 to
Welcome to the Look Ahead. Let's see what meetings and events are happening in our city in the upcoming week.
that truly aims its objectives, reports on its objectives, reports on its performance, and tells us, where things are backslipping or they need additional. At least they're being transparent. And in the past, especially with the area of the outages and the Mylar balloons and the raccoons and all that. But I think, in my opinion, we need to really shorten some of these presentations to something that is succinct and memorable. I was watching all of you and I saw glazed eyes. If you guys are bored, imagine what the public out there who are basically tuned on television, they'll basically turn it off. And if there are any comments coming to an oral portion of it, there'll be no audience. Now, I don't know if this is by design or not, but I think, in my opinion, that some of your staff need some training in how to do a PowerPoint demo. Because I think that the same ideas could be concisely put in about 4 minutes. This is the status of the projects that we have. We are on track. We're at 90%, right? We made this type of expenditures. Our system is on budget. They got to think about the audience out there who is watching this thing for them to get the level of confidence that they richly deserve. But I think that is incredibly winded and long, and I know that it may offend them. But I think that if I were to do a presentation like this in one of my customers, I lose the sale. I think programs that are out there, for example, Demo to Sell, teach the concept of how to make a presentation, how to set up the PowerPoints, how to highlight what's important, and allows the interest of the public out there to remain. So that's my suggestion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. I'm sure Mr. Steiger will review that and maybe make some enhancement in the future. Next item, please, George.
Item 3E, Smart Grid Update. Craig Keenan.
Mr. President, Commissioners, my name is Craig Keenan, Marketing Manager and Smart Grid Project Sponsor. Let me take my glasses. I was like, basically, I'm going to give an update of an overview of the project, just to bring us back up to date on what the project encompasses. I'll give you an understanding of what our objectives are, talk a little bit about where we are today, and then cover the outreach activities we've done in September, and then talk about our expenses at the end. Guess I'm operating this. Before I get started, I'd just like to highlight, this was in our DOE grant, and there's been a lot of discussion. I've been at many conferences and read a lot of journal articles that are out lately about smart grid, and there's a lot of experts out there that are coming to the realization that the customers needs to be involved in smart grid. I just highlight this because this was August 2009, and we told the DOE up front that none of this works without the customer and getting the customer involved, and we're really committed to that. In the interest of time, I won't read that unless you want me to. As far as the project overview, how do I go back? I think I clicked it twice. Phase 1, we have the communications backhaul that consists of the Tropos Wi-Fi system, the Cisco Ethernet IP, and the fiber optic connection. We are pretty much done with that area. Communications is vitally important, and one thing we've learned from the various projects is that you have to have the communications in first, so we've done that. Another area in Phase 1 is the information technology upgrades. Those upgrades are moving along pretty well. It consists of data storage, disaster recovery. We had installed an interruptible power supply in the city IT department, and we're working on an updated IT architecture. We recently hired a firm to come in and look at the whole architecture the way it is set up, and then project out what it needs to look like in a smart grid situation, and help us develop a plan for getting from where we are to there. Smart grid project overview, customer programs. This is phase 2 once we get the smart grid in place. Some of these things are overlapping. The in-home displays, that's the communication piece that was discussed earlier. It will give us the opportunity of communicating directly inside a customer's home or apartment should they want one of these devices in there, and that'll go a long way to getting messages to customers. We're also working on an O-Power web portal where we'll be able to link our home energy reports that go out right now. We'll expand that program, put it on a web-based for everybody to go to and see their data. It won't be real time. It would be like next day data, but then people can participate in the benefits of the smart grid right away as they get their meter put in. The other program is the thermal energy storage program we're doing with ICE Energy. We've installed 15 ICE Bear units on city facilities so far. We have another 12 we're supposed to be putting in this month, and about 30 we're going to be putting in on customer buildings. The total project is around 200 ICE Bears, and that's moving ahead. Demand response, Mr. Steiger talked about demand response and how we have a program. We're beginning to market that to our customers and hope to have that up and working real soon. The other part of the customer programs is the experimental pricing programs. That's a couple of years down the road. We need to collect the data, look at the data, come up with what these rates might look like. So, like I said, that's a couple of years down the road. Distribution automation program. This is a program that Mr. Obari just spoke about. This, in terms of computer systems, it starts out with an enterprise service bus, maybe two, one on the operational side, one on the business side, and then a series of enterprise computer systems that we'll look at. And then, like I said, those are the ones Mr. Obari already mentioned in the last presentation. And he also mentioned the other one. He stole my thunder here, the distribution automation program that he had discussed. As far as project objectives, the objectives of the project are the cost containment for utility and our customers. Reduce our costs, reduce the cost to the customer. That's through better asset utilization, deferral of system upgrades, reduction in peak demand, conservation of water and electricity, support for anticipated innovations. One thing that's out there is electric vehicles. I believe you had a presentation on that at the last meeting. That could be a big item for us to have to deal with, and Smart Grid will allow us to be able to do that. Environmental considerations. There's the AB 32 discussion from earlier. This Smart Grid will help us meet those requirements. And then improve reliability and customer service. mainly from the data we'll have. We'll have a lot more data than we have right now on the system, what it's doing, and be able to respond quickly to customer inquiries and as far as the distribution management. Where are we today? We have the hardware and the software has been installed. We have tested and installed a citywide Tropos Wi-Fi system to support all our smart grid communication needs. We did the proof of concept with 1,000 electric and 500 water. We are moving ahead with the interfaces between the MDMS and the CIS. That's still progressing smoothly, and we're testing it, and it appears to be working well. We are doing a small, what we call POC, where we're going to install a couple hundred more meters just to test the processes and make sure that the problems we ran into in the initial deployment, that we've worked all those out and that they're going to work fine. Outreach activities. You're moving this forward for me, right? Good. Advertising. We did a lot of advertising and customer education poster and desk easels. We got some posters and desk easels with information we put around at the libraries and all the public counters, city counters. As far as the town hall meetings, yes, we had 3 meetings and participation was low. 2 or 3 people at the first couple meetings, and I believe the last meeting there was just a couple of people there. And I agree, we probably have to find new ways to meet and explain things to customers. Maybe the town hall is not the way people want to do it anymore. Because we did our best. We advertised it 2 or 3 places in the news press. We put it in the source. We put it on our website. We did the Twitter things, and we advertised in Ozabrez and Masas Weekly. It really didn't help. We have been doing presentations. I gave a presentation at the Southern California Forum. It's a group of low-income advocates and community-based organizations on our smart grid that was very well received. They're really interested in the smart grid and the smart meter program. There was a block party we went to. The advisory committee, we went to the Smart Energy Experience exhibit at Edison this past week. It was a wonderful visit, and we thank Zanku, Commissioner Armenian, for setting that up for us. Wonderful experience. I mean, I know all these technologies, but to actually see them working, it was amazing to see it working. Website, we do our best to put all these things on the website. We do have the FAQs in Armenian, Korean, and Spanish uploaded on there. We had one of, I believe it was at one of the community meetings, one of the customers had suggested they couldn't find the smart grid information and that we should have a tab on the top that just said smart grid. We went ahead and did that. So if you look along the top, it says smart grid. You don't have to wait for the banner to cycle through to get to it. We did customer notification mailings to the customers who are going to get meters here in this next month, and we did press releases on the town hall meetings. So that was the outreach. You did ask for a presentation or where our budget is right now. This is a time-based budget, goes through March, or actually February 2013. Our commitment to the DOE for the electric smart grid is $51,302,105. To date, we are at about $14.5 million we've spent. We had projected we'd be at $25 million right now. The difference in that is primarily the ITRON contract and the UPA contract, the meters and the installation. The meters and the installation were delayed in the May-June time frame initially because we were going from a cellular base to a Tropos Wi-Fi system. We had issues to get that in place. That's now in place, so we're back on schedule as far as that went. Then the other issue is the one you know about with the interfaces. We can't do production without making sure the interfaces work, and that's going to take us at least another month. Once that happens, it's relatively simple to get back on track because you just bring in the people you need to start putting in the meters, and we'll be back up. It's the same thing with water. The water, we're looking at being done next summer. it tracks the same way. The difference between what we spent, the $7.3 million, and what we projected at this point, 13.7, is the Itron and installation contracts. So that's my presentation. Any questions?
No question. Just a quick clarification on the actual to budget expenses. That's a significant difference in the amount of expenses we've incurred to date. Just want to make sure that I understood it correctly, and maybe if you could clarify this. Was the difference due to the fact that we have saved capital, or was it because some of the expenses have not hit the books yet?
The difference between the actuals and the projected is the fact that the production part of the project, we were originally looking to go into production, meaning going out, doing meters, predominantly, I don't know how many a day, a few thousand a week, I think it is, in June. It's now October, and we haven't gone to production yet. It's probably the end of October into November before we do that. So that's the difference.
Okay, so we'll actually incur the difference in the expenses somewhere along.
Those lines will get closer together in the next few months.
I had a couple questions. First, thank you for this presentation. On the expense and the budget side, what of this how much of this $14 million have we received actual DOE funds for? Department of Energy funds from the stimulus grant?
We receive, well, I don't have the exact numbers, but I do have about, I would say, $3 million, because they're still processing our May invoice. And our June invoice we haven't submitted to them because we don't want them to have two. There was also some delay in the fact that the city's books don't close. They just closed for June a couple weeks ago. But primarily, it was the problem there was we had a DOE technical officer. They promoted him to be in charge of the whole project. They brought in a new technical officer in May, and now we have to go over all the same issues with her as we did with him, and so our May invoice got held up. But we expect to get that resolved here in the next week.
And for the benefit of the public, out of the approximate $51 million total budget, how much of that will come from Department of Energy stimulus funds?
$20 million from DOE, and do you want to mention what we got the other day, or are we going to hold off until it's official?
Well, we have tentatively been notified that we will receive an additional $1 million from the California Energy Commission.
So for a total of about $21 million coming from outside Glendale sources.
Correct.
Yes.
So out of the $20 million so far, approximately $3 million has come in already?
Yes. I would have to verify that, but I'm
approximately.
just
Okay. And then my other question had to do with with the new technology and the new information that will be coming in from the meters, new customer information. What steps are being taken to train and prepare those those employees who are the customer-facing employees on the new programs, the new systems, so that they can help the customer navigate through this new data that will be coming in?
They have been receiving training. If you want details, can you? Terry McDonald is our project manager, and he can give you some details on the training they've received and what's.
President Yao, Commissioners, Mr. Steiger, Terry McDonald, project manager. The way we're approaching the training is where we've asked Itron to identify all of the future state roles that have to be occupied. And we've just recently gotten that list. What we're doing now is we're taking that list and we're looking at all internal people and saying, who are the people who are going to fill these roles? Once we have either positions or individuals identified that match up with the future state roles, we're going to be taking a look at the amount of loading put on those people to determine whether we have adequate staff to be able to fulfill those roles. To the extent that we can crosswalk someone from an existing position into a future state position, we're pairing that person up with a counterpart from Itron for the rest of this fall. At the same time that we're having them work side by side with the Itron person essentially driving the system and the GWP person observing, we're creating new training materials and job aids to assist these employees. And what we want to have is the equivalent of, for lack of a better term, an internal iTunes on SharePoint, so that if you need to perform a task, you'll be able to go to the SharePoint site and let's say the task is run daily reports from the new MDMS. You'll pull down an instruction sheet that will be in Word or PDF, and it will give you the step-by-step instructions. And adjacent to that will be a 3 to 5 minute video showing you how to do it. And we feel that these job aids are actually more powerful than classroom instruction for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that as personnel turnover occurs, if you've done the classroom instruction and the instructor's gone, you can't repeat the instruction. More importantly, our experience has been that if you stick someone in a classroom for 2 weeks and you pump their brain full of information, and then they don't have to use that information until a month later, they scratch their head and they say, gee, I think we learned that in class, but I haven't a clue as to where to begin. So we feel as though these job aids are actually more powerful, and the key people who will be doing the core functions will have that one-on-one time with their Itron counterpart over the next 3 months. We think the combination of the two is a powerful way of getting the information across.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Questions or comments? Mr. Miller?
Yes, I wanted to suggest maybe in future reports it might be helpful to have a Gantt chart in which you could show the various components of the project and where we are with respect to all of them. It might be a succinct way of summarizing where we are. And in addition to which, I think we're focusing a lot on the implementation, and we want to remember that we have to pay attention to the operation and maintenance of these and the ways we expect to learn from them. Actually, you have covered a lot of that, to be fair, but perhaps some of those components could also be figured in a second Gantt chart that's more related to the operation and maintenance as opposed to the construction or implementation of the project. Thank you. That's all I had.
Yeah, and I would like to concur with that recommendation, because it would be very useful to see some kind of Gantt chart laid out of where we are and where we're trying to get to, and also for the customer's perspective, for the viewing public, to understand what this is all about, because there's a lot of slides here, and from when they watch this, they might not understand what we're talking about. So somehow maybe some visuals, if you can have those, like IHDs or those smart meters, so that those people who haven't received a smart meter yet maybe can anticipate, so that the more we drill into them, if they happen to watch it, then they'll understand this is all about the impact to the meter, the usage, and those type of things. So the more visuals, the better. Thank you.
I do have one final question. You mentioned something, and I just want to make sure. Is there a reason why we don't submit invoices for June? I mean, we're in the month of October now. How long does it take for us to, number one, prepare those invoices? And then if DOE's, I'm assuming they have a backlog, doesn't it make sense to send it earlier? Or do you work out per invoice until it gets paid? So how does that work? If you can explain that briefly.
Well, then, what we have to do, we have to go into PeopleSoft, print out everything that's been charged to every project under the umbrella project. You have to locate all the invoices from the contractors and other people who've charged to the project. You have to have all that documentation. You have to put it all together. You got to know every hour that's been worked on the project by job classification. There's a number of things you have to put together, and it's all going to one person at DOE. That's why we want the previous month's invoice approved and finalized before we give them another one. And so it's a long process. Now, the reason why, we're now into October. There are things with the city's finance system that, the June one did not close until a couple weeks ago. So I could have submitted June had I had the information a month or two ago. I still wouldn't have because DOE hadn't approved May. But there's a number of things that go in there. And it's a lot of work to put all that together.
Right, so the bottleneck is one on the DOE side, and the second really on closing the books on our side over here.
Right, but technically that didn't create a bottleneck because they hadn't done May. It would have had they processed May.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keenan. Any additional comments or questions? So at this point, I'll invite Mr. Herbert Milano to speak on this item.
President Yao, members of the Glendale Water and Power Commission and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I think it was a couple of months ago when Mr. Steiger made a presentation in front of the City Council. He was given an update on this project, and he explained what the benefits to the customer are. He was interrupted by Councilman David Weaver. He says, no, I don't want to know what's going to be the benefit to the customer. I want to know what's the benefit to the city. The reason why I needed to explain that is because eventually this type of messaging comes from the City Council, trickles down to the rest of the staff. Now, I heard that, I cringed, because at the end of the day, as the residents and stakeholders who are the beneficiaries of this whole system, or should be. And unfortunately, I needed to mention that to you because we need to truly focus on the customer, the eventual beneficiary of this whole system. It's not the city staff, it's not the pension of the system, it's not their salaries, it's the stakeholders. And I want to emphasize that because it's really important when you're basically managing a project, right? That even though it is meant to address issues concerning the utilities so they can serve us better, you have to continually keep in touch with regard to how is it going to benefit the customer. The total cost of this project right now stands at $51.3 million. We should be keeping a close tab on that to see if it really is going to exceed that or we're going to stay within it. Because I think that the Glendale Water and Power, and Public Works as another example, must have several of their key managers and individuals responsible for a project be certified as project management professionals. In private industry, I cannot touch a project of over $1 million if I don't have that certification or have the person in charge to have that certification. We don't touch it. And I can see how a project of $51 million does not have at least half a dozen people within GWP fully certified. I suggest for this commission that you make a requirement and an expectation that within 12 months you will have at least 6 individuals, at a minimum 6, within this department fully certified by the Project Management Institute. Next, concerning the actual cost, we need to know, I think, and I like to know, what is the cost of this particular service overall, all inclusive, per single family residence? What is the cost per apartment building? The average apartment building size is 8. And per commercial installation. We should know because it gives us a smaller number by which we can evaluate. So if the actual number is, let's say, the cost to implement this per household will be $350. It gives us a sense of what the payback will be eventually. Because one of the objectives that we have here is really in cost containment, using his words, to the utility and cost containment to the customer. If I were to ask you right now what is the expected cost reduction to you as a customer per month, what would it be? I don't think you know. I don't know. I don't know what the payback is. If the cost to implement this, let's assume per single family household is $350, and I'm able to reduce my electrical rate by $10 a month, well, it's going to be a long time before this thing pays back to me. But of course, that's not the only service. The other one is the cost containment at the utility. In order for me to know what is the cost benefit to the utility and what is the payback period for this, I need to know what the total salaries and benefits are for those individuals who are working within the utility for both electrical and water, and then find out what those costs are year to year. Are they going to increase? Are you going to have additional individuals hired because of this project? And if so, what are those costs going to be? But I haven't seen any number that says, here is our total labor costs, right, with regard to overtime and benefits and so forth, and here will be, or the expected cost will be 1 year from now. I don't have that. So you need a return on this investment quantified somehow, and that should be part of the project. The other is that we really need, for a project of this type, a monthly report. And as you suggested, a Gantt chart that tells us whether this project is slipping or not, and have a definitive report every month. I cannot see how a project that is scheduled to be completed in less than a year will not have a monthly report. You see, the beauty about this is that there are public utilities that are private, and we know how private industry generally works. And I don't see why we should have a different standard for a public utility. I think we can live up to that and improve what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolano. Any feedback or comments?
I would like to point out that we have been having monthly reports on this project to the Commission. With respect to the customer interest of this project, I would like to point out on slide 2 of Mr. Keenan's presentation, it states, providing real benefits to our customers is the primary motivating factor in GWP's move to the smart grid. It then proceeds to make several other statements in which the customer is mentioned 3 more times. So I think that to state that we're not focusing on the customer in this process is incorrect. Regarding Project Management Institute, I would like to note that you had your projects presented here about 10 months ago, and we had positive return on the schedule as well as the cost there. I don't really see that extra training is really needed. You were providing adequate training at that time. And then on your return, the return on investment was projected to be positive with this project. And I think that's the motivation for holding it. I don't know what the experience has been in the industry, but I think other utilities have implemented this project with a positive return on investment. So we expect to see that here as well. Thank you.
Can I just...
Sure, Mr. Tyker.
I think it's a shame that Mr. Milano gets up here and says what he says without referring back to the exhaustive study that was done by KEMA to do our business case and presented here. I believe you may have been here, Mr. Milano, and to the City Council. And to the penny, it laid out every single item that you've mentioned. So I think I would like to suggest that you do your homework when you come up here and make statements like that. I think it's unnecessary, it's a waste of time, and it's an unfortunate, biasing of the facts to the public. So I would appreciate it from now on if you do your homework. And I would suggest that you go back tonight, you look up the report that was done by KEMA, read it in total, and you'll find every single item that you mentioned here. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
Just want to add that I appreciate the great depth and comprehensive work that's done in managing a very, very complex project. I think our challenge will, of course, be in the industry in general is the customer engagement part. I'm confident that that is very much high on the radar with GWP as it is with every other utility implementing these sorts of projects. It will be challenging because generally engaging customers on energy issues has been something that the industry has not done in the past. The industry spent 100 years trying to get people not to think about energy so that it's pervasive. And now we're going to spend the next 10 years changing all that with this new technology to engage them in the solution and the process. It's not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a step-by-step process. So to expect these sorts of massive transitional things to happen overnight is unrealistic. And I think we're very much in the right direction with GWP. I think we're taking good steps. There's always room for improvement. And I think that GWP has been open to those opportunities for improvement as they have presented themselves. So thank you very much for all the great work, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Keenan.
Yes, I'd like to echo that comment as well, and that's a very It sounds like it's a very comprehensive program and project that's taking place. I think Mr. Keenan mentioned, as one of his slides suggests, that they visit SCE facility to learn from other people. He did a lot of presentations and trying to get the best practices out there so that they can bring it into Glendale to use. So it's not something that Glendale, I think GWP staff is taking anything lightly. And I think moving forward, they do engage the customer and they do keep the customer in mind every time they work on projects.
I wanted to add one more thing, and that is that the DOE, when they announced these sorts of stimulus grant, availability of these sorts of stimulus grants was a while ago, and not a lot has been paid out, but GWP has been successful in getting paid out, which is why I asked that question specifically. And I think that's a testament to the very rigid documentation process that the Department of Energy requires. And so I think we should be very appreciative of those efforts that the city has actually received $3 million out of those stimulus funds thus far. And the fact of just getting the actual stimulus grants approved, one of few utilities of this size to actually achieve that. So I think that's something that the Glendale customers and the city of Glendale should be appreciative of that sort of work. If the effort was not made, Glendale would not have received those sorts of taxpayer dollars coming back into the city of Glendale.
Thank you. Next item, please, George.
Item 4, oral communications.
And we have one last speaker, Mr. Herbert Milano, please. 5 minutes.
President Yao, members of the Glendale Water and Power Commission, and city staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I'd like to ask a question that is fairly relevant with regard to the current state of the water availability overall. I wonder whether this city is truly, and this commission is truly committed to conservation or not. Because from what I heard today, it appears to me that we are saying we are committed to conservation except if it impacts our finances. And I think that the issue with water is such a major situation for California that it should be guiding policy. It should be guiding rates. It should be guiding practically everything that we do here. I have been a promoter of volumetric fees and not this concoction of fixed rates for delivery charge and fixed rate for the size of the meter. Why should I pay differently for an apartment building that is using a 2-inch water line coming in or someone else using a 1-inch water line? Why should that rate be different? Logically, at the end of the day, it is usage that is important. The same thing with electricity. Even though every utility out there may be using this concoction of fixed rates for this and fixed rates for that, it's irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, people are going to use water. And of course, if you make it relevant to those costs, I think that we should strongly promote simplicity. And you're going to need the simplicity. Because once those electric and water meters come into place and you start jacking the rate all over the place because of the demand, you're not going to want to, how in the world would you explain it? Unless you say, look, during peak hours, this is the rate. It goes up by 10% or whatever number it is that you decide. We need simplicity in rates for the primary purpose of conservation, and second, so that you will allow systems like this to be truly transparent to the user. I want to be able to read a meter and say, yeah, I know exactly what is happening. At the end of the day, it is the decision maker, the user, who needs to be able to look at that and says, all right, I'll control my costs. And this is the impact that it's going to have. Now, the issue with concern to the transfers. In the past 10 years, the city budget went from $400 million to $800 million. During that same period of time, the population of Glendale grew by about 3%, maybe 3.5%, tops. So the budget went up by 100%, population grew by 3%. What are we doing with that extra $400 million? Where is it going? Because if I'm looking at the study of the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the income, the revenues that the city gets from property tax, added to that the additional revenues from sales tax, is insufficient to cover the salary and benefit increases that the city has had. The reason why the transfers are needed is not, as someone said here, due to economic conditions. It is due to the significant increase in the payroll and the benefits. Pension benefits alone increased by 250%. If it were not for those changes in the pension, we would not need this level of transfer. This city has done very well vis-a-vis many other cities because we have basically a stable housing environment. The city has never lost money or any reduction year to year to that. That means that the only way to be able to support the pension increases alone, you need those transfers from the utility. And from now that we have these records, especially the ones that were distributed at the Homeowners Coordinating Council, it shows that we have been deficient in addressing the capital needs of the utility. Mr. Steiger may think that I am his nemesis here, but I'm not. I'm trying to support this utility to make sure that it addresses its whole infrastructure properly and that people have a fair price for that. But we cannot have a fair price if we don't control salaries, if we don't control the pensions, if we don't control the other benefits. Medical payments for medical coverage have increased in the city of Glendale 500%. And I can come back here next month and show you all the numbers. They all come from the CAFR. And the reason why these particular increases are needed in the transfer is because of the overabuse of a bloated city budget. I think that your responsibility comes first to the utility and its customers, and to be able to voice it. We need people of courage to speak the truth. Thank you very much.
Milano, any comments? Well, let's move on to the next item, please.
Item 5, old business.
Any old business we want to discuss?
I wanted to mention, we didn't have an outage report this time from the power system. I think we had something in the mail about it, but was that intentional, or are we moving towards not reporting about that?
No, we will report it. We just did not do it this month.
Okay, all right. We expect to do it monthly, I take it?
Correct.
Okay. Similarly with the water supply report?
It was in your it is in your
I did see it there, but normally it's brought to the attention of the commission formally.
That's true. We're trying to
scale back
to regulate. As you can see, we're
yes.
All
right.
time.
I just wanted to check on that. Okay, that's fine with me. I have no objection. Thank you.
Any other old business? Well, next item, please, George.
Item 6, new business.
New business, we have one item from the city attorney's office.
Yes, President. Yeah, I can report to you that I have investigated that issue. I was hopeful that there was a way that you could go about formulating a commission action with respect to the water rates without a special meeting, but unfortunately there's not. Even if you were to do a written submission, that would require a special meeting in order for you to form a joint decision and a joint action as a commission. You could certainly all express your views as individual commission members, and that could be reflected in the minutes today, or you could make individual appearances at the city council meeting if you so chose. But in order to take a formal commission action, you'd need to have a special meeting between now and the city council meeting.
So what do you suggest?
Well, a comment I have is that I think a formal resolution is the strongest statement. And I think this is such an issue of dire importance to the utility. I'm willing to do that. We could talk about dates. Of course, it depends on you gentlemen if you feel that you can spare the time.
Well, does have to, we have to check the coverage, the TV, and the room availability and those things, right? So we can't really determine what day is best.
You mentioned the dates of availability from October 12th to 19th.
Yeah.
Okay, I can look into that and email each of you with your availability.
I can tell you right now, Tuesday would be a good day for me. Actually, any time that day, but probably later in the evening is better for everyone.
City council meeting.
City council.
Sorry. Well, I guess that's out.
That's why George has to check, because, and then we might have to voice our own opinion at the city council meeting. We want to convey our opinions to them. That's maybe the alternate option.
I'm willing to do that also. I want to sit down and research it more thoroughly. I'd have to anyway, even if we met specially.
So do we still want George to continue looking for an alternate location, time, and date for a special meeting?
I would be in favor of that.
I agree. I think you should definitely look into it. Email us, but as a safe haven, you should at least plan option B, which is to attend a meeting that and voice our opinions, or at least have a few representatives that will be voicing our opinions as a plan B.
If Assistant City Attorney Christine Godinez would confirm that we need at least 48 hours prior to the meeting to correct. We need 48 hours prior notice.
I believe
to the
it's
special meeting.
24 for
24
special
hours
meeting.
for special. Okay.
Yeah, and it can be called either by the president or any 3 members. It sounds like you've got at least 4 that are interested. So we'll just have to look for a date.
Okay.
If you're able to get to us tomorrow, then we could make a quick decision on that.
Sure.
Okay. And I think we just need an hour or less, I don't think we need a full 2 hours or anything.
That's correct, yeah. I will comment that the weekend isn't good for me. I'm going to be gone that following weekends. I don't know that would be considered an option, but you gentlemen may know something about your options or the times that you're available.
I think it's regular business hours.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And we'll be forming an action item, correct?
That would be an action item, yes.
So that's an action item, and the new business is to explore all dates and locations for a special water rate consideration meeting. Okay, any other new business?
I did want to discuss a little bit about the issue that you had brought up earlier, Commissioner Yao, regarding this mailer regarding the dirty air situation that we talked about earlier. And I don't know if this is an appropriate time to talk about it or whether you had anticipated discussing it at a future meeting, Mr. Steiger.
Yes, the answer is what we've done. Let me give you a little bit of overview because it's not an agenda item, so I have to limit my discussion. But as I mentioned before, why we are targeted because of our involvement with 2 coal units, we have issued a statement in response to that. We've posted it on our website. It's in the source, which will be going out shortly. And at this point, we've taken the approach that while we have the response, we are not taking any additional action until we see if there's additional sentiment to do so, because the response is quite specific, and so we can make this available to all of you if we haven't already. I guess we haven't. So we will do that. And what I will do is agendize it for the next meeting so we can discuss it more specifically. And if you have some thoughts as to what you'd like to do to move ahead with it or not, we can do so at that time.
Okay.
So will you suggest, Commissioner Miller, to further discuss this item in the next meeting?
Well, I think there needs to be some public discussion of the issue because I'm afraid of the issue being characterized to a large number of people, the electorate, so to speak, in a way that is lopsided or one-sided and may cause people to move in a direction that may not be in their best interest if they had all the information available that they could. For example, just to elaborate, I think it's a true statement that all types of power generation projects, whether they're renewable energy or coal, have adverse environmental consequences that have to be taken into account in an environmental review. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Yeah. And anyway, so I think some discussion of it would be educational for the public, perhaps, in the commission meeting.
Then we can agendize it for the next meeting.
Okay.
Have we done a lot of feedback from that mailer?
We've had none.
None, right? Put that on.
In addition to which, I'd like to comment. There's other utilities in the area that are moving in that direction. We could talk about their experiences, perhaps.
Yes, and we've already done so. So
Okay.
yes, we can discuss it.
Okay. Thank you.
Or did we cover agenda forecast already?
No, we haven't done that yet.
Okay. All right. No new business. Next item, please.
Item number 7, agenda forecast.
So we had a few items.
Let's see, earlier in our meeting today, there was a reference to the budgetary plan for recycled water. Will that be on one of the agendas of the future meetings?
Most likely, it will be at least July or February, or excuse me, January, February.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I would suggest it be thrown on.
So everything else for the November agenda is correct, Mr. Steiger? The 3 items there, and then including the few items discussed today?
Does that include agenda items? Checking.
Commissioner Yao, I had one written down regarding the cost of energy during the late September peak and the hedging activity associated with that. That was one item that I believe you mentioned. Is there a second commissioner that'd be interested in hearing that item?
I second that.
Okay.
President Yao, yes, the forecast is up to date. So if we're missing something, please let us know.
Anything else?
Commissioner Ajemian, you had mentioned data on how far behind we are in the various schools in the quarterly scoreboard. And I just wanted to confirm you meant that that would be part of the next quarterly scoreboard or as a separate item?
That's fine. Next quarterly scoreboard is fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And then there was the water supply report and the outage report that Commissioner Miller had mentioned.
Well, just to clarify, I think it would have been suggested the water supply report not be included as a regular item. I don't have a problem with taking it off as a regular item, but my opinion is just my opinion that I'd open that up for discussion.
Well, having what we had today, maybe just briefly mention that the water supply report is in our binder.
Sure.
To let us know.
And as far as the electrical outage report, that's normally been an item. I don't know if the commission needs to formally endorse having it monthly or not. I'll leave that up to the assistant city attorney or the others
That's
here.
not in the binder, right? The monthly electrical outage report? I think it is.
No.
Isn't it a SADI or a...
It's the Sadie Katie report.
Saw that.
Did you?
It's an outage report. Yeah. Is it in here? Should be in the back. Sure.
Maybe it's just the electrical plan, the 5-year plan.
Well, I didn't think it would be because that's a capital plan, and this outage report is more an operation and maintenance.
Yeah, it's not in
Sure.
here, and I'm not sure why, but it's.
I don't recall seeing it in any mailer either.
Yeah, but as you've noted, we normally do include that, so we shall continue to include that.
Okay. Do we need to formally endorse that?
No, at this point, we're just going through agenda forecast, so for purposes of the next meeting, if there's 2 commissioners that like to have that on the agenda, we can add that. Otherwise, we can just continue to put it in the package.
Well, I'll make a motion that we have it on the next, as a routine item on the agendas.
Is there a second commissioner that,
Yeah, I would like to see that too.
okay.
Operational report.
Yeah.
So,
This would be the same as the smart grid update, correct? As if every single...
No, this is a report on outages that have occurred in the distribution system, how long they are, why they occurred, and then it's compared with industry-wide indices, and it's tied in more to our strategic goals than it is to the smart grid, which is a separate strategic goal. Thank you.
George, was your question whether it should be a monthly report or...
My question was whether this would be a regularly occurring agenda item or as a report, as information.
Yes, that's what we're asking for.
Yeah, we can list it as the monthly electrical outage report.
sure.
Sure. Anything else?
Better quality.
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
We had a lot already.
That's that? Yeah, I know. I seem to do that all the time.
Okay. Additional item? Mr. Steiger?
I would like to with your permission, call it the monthly electric reliability report, if we can.
Oh, okay, that's right. It's good terminology, sorry.
I concur with that. I think that's a better term.
Anything else? Okay, then I'll announce the next meeting. It's going to be on Monday, November 1st. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I would like to note I will not be at the meeting on November 1st. I think I've notified most of you. I thought I'd mention it here. I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.